The Stanford Prison Experiment is widely recognized as one of the most infamous unethical psychology experiments. Yet, it's just one among many. Countless other unethical experiments in the realm of psychology serve as a cautionary tale on what guidelines a psychologist should follow to ensure that the experiment can uphold ethical standards. Today, thanks to the Ethical Code and Institutional Review Board, most of these experiments cannot be performed today. But before we dive deeper into different examples of real-life unethical experiments, let's discuss what is considered unethical. According to the American Psychological Association and British Psychological Society, there are 10 guidelines psychologists must follow to consider their experiments ethical. So here are the list of ethical considerations. The first is informed consent, meaning the participants must be fully informed about the nature, purpose, and potential risks or benefits of the study before agreeing to participate. This is usually implemented by researchers using written and verbal consent and ensuring participants know they can withdraw at any time. Second, there is protection of participants, meaning researchers should take a step to minimize any potential physical, psychological, or emotional harm to participants. After that, they should make sure that the benefits outweigh any potential harm. The third is confidentiality. Researchers should ensure that the participants' personal information is kept confidential and that their identities are protected in the reporting of research findings. So, researchers cannot go around telling people you were a part of the experiment unless you allow them to. Fourth, debriefing. Researchers should provide participants with a debriefing session, explaining the purpose of the study, addressing any misconceptions, and offering information if needed. Fifth, voluntary participation. Yes, researchers cannot just pick someone off the street and make them participate in their experiment without telling them first. They also cannot force participants to continue with the experiment if the participant expresses that they wish to withdraw. 6. Deception. If deception is necessary, researchers should justify its use and provide a thorough debriefing to the participants and explain the reason why it is used in the first place. 7. Fair treatment and respect. Researchers are encouraged to avoid exploiting vulnerable populations like children and individuals with cognitive impairments. Other than that, they also have to ensure all participants are treated with respect without discrimination based on age, sex, sexuality, ethnicity, or any other demographic factors. 8. Competence and training. Researchers have to, know psychology and these ethical guidelines in order to conduct experiments ethically. 9. Institutional Review Board or IRB approval. Before conducting an experiment, researchers should consult the IRB or Ethics Committee before conducting experiments on human subjects. This ensures a fair assessment of the research ethical aspects before it is done. Lastly, 10th, reporting of results. Researchers should accurately report their methods and results, avoiding selective reporting and ensuring transparency in the presentation of findings. These are the building blocks for an ethical experiment. However, before these guidelines were ever implemented, many experiments contained a lot of unethical procedure that will breach the ethical guidelines set today. Another unethical experiment besides the Stanford Prison experiments is the Milgram Shocking Obedience experiment, conducted at Yale University in 1961, that aimed to study people's willingness to obey authority even at the expense of others. They wanted specifically to examine justifications of acts of genocide offered by those accused in World War II. Their justification was that they were just following orders from their superiors. In the experiment, participants were divided into two groups, teachers and learners, and each teacher was assigned a learner. The learner had electrodes attached to their arms and the teacher will go to another room with the researcher. The room had an electric shock generator varying from 15 volts, labeled slight shock, to 275 volts, labeled severe shock, and doors 450 volts, labeled XXX to emphasize its danger. The learner was given a list of word pairs and the teachers had to test their recall. The teacher was told to administer an electric shock every time the learner makes a mistake, with increasing levels of shock each time. The catch was that the learners did not actually receive an electric shock. They were actors that pretended to receive electric shocks and purposely got the answers wrong. This caused the teacher to believe that the learners were actually getting shocked when they cried and begged for mercy. When the teacher refused to continue shocking, the experimenter prodded the teachers to continue using phrases such as, "Please continue," "The experiment requires you to continue," and "You have no other choice but to continue." The results shows that 65% of participants continue to the highest 450 volts even after knowing it is severely dangerous. But all of the participants continued to 300 volts. This experiment displayed the willingness of people to follow an authority's order, even to the extent of killing people as obedience to authority. Although the participants were not physically harmed since the learners were all actors, it caused psychological distress to the participants who believed they were actually shocking someone. This experiment did not obey the second principle of ethical experiments, which is protection of participants. It also prevented participants from giving their informed consent, which violates the first principle. It is due to the experiment that the AP and BPS now require researchers to give more information to participants before they agree to take part in the study. The next experiment is called Little Albert, conducted by John B. Watson. This experiment wanted to know whether a baby could be conditioned to fear something they didn't fear before. The conditioning tactic is normally seen in dog training to condition a dog to perform certain actions or potty train them. It is also important to note that an innate fear all humans have is that of loud noises. Little Albert was 9 months old when he was experimented on. First, he was exposed to a series of stimuli, including a white rat, a rabbit, a monkey, mask, and burning newspaper, while the researchers observed his reaction. Initially, Little Albert displayed no fear of any of the objects. However, the next time Little Albert was exposed to the white rat, the researchers made a loud noise by hitting a metal pipe with a hammer. Naturally, he cried after the loud noises. After repeating it a few times, Little Albert soon expected loud noise to be associated with white rat and became scared of the rat. This experiment shows that fear can be conditioned. However, this experiment is extremely unethical as it violates the seventh because they use a demographic which is 9-month-old child. They cannot consent nor tell the researchers that he liked to withdraw. It also violates the first guideline of informed consent because Albert's mother was not informed that her son would be used in this kind of experiment, and so they did not obtain her consent. Other than that, this experiment clearly violates guideline 2, where the child is not protected from psychological harm. Albert lives in fear of white things after the experiment due to the conditioning. That concludes this video about unethical psychology experiments. While these experiments are often disturbing, we can still learn some important things about human and animal behavior from the results.